For our online students, if you're still there, we had a technical difficulty. We hope we have it completed. We are now ready for the 6th chapter of the book of Joshua, and we will see if we can get some other things done, maybe at a later time, where you can go to the archives. But we find in the Jericho is the first city. Now, it's the first town or city that they came to after they came across the River Jordan. Now, they did camp at a place called Gilgal, but at that time, I don't think there was a city there. It's just a place. In fact, it was called the place of rolling away, talking about the circumcision. But Jericho is it's a city that's mentioned many times in the scriptures. Today, as I was growing up as a child, I thought about here are people told to march around a city for 7 times in one day. Now, I grew up north of Memphis, Tennessee. At that time, Memphis wasn't a huge place, but I don't believe a fellow could walk around it in 7 times in one day. And I often wondered exactly why this was. Why that how could people do this? And then, as I've told you before, I had the privilege of going to Israel, and when you come to the ruins of Jericho, you have about 13 acres. Ooh. Yeah, 13 acres. Now, people could walk around 13 acres 1 time a day or 7 times in one day.
It still would take some time.
Yeah, it would take some time, but it's not like walking around Atlanta or walking around the bypass around Atlanta where we are from, where I'm from. So we need to keep that in mind. But then the writer says, now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none went in. They were on a self-inflicted siege. The Israelites had not yet laid siege to it. In fact, they wouldn't have known what a siege was at this particular point. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and its mighty men of valor. And again, we notice that fact that God has given it, but you have something to do. So God says, you shall march around the city, all you men of war, you shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. Now, if when I teach this or have taught it in children's classes or to young children, I have them write this down. We've got 1 day a week plus 6 times. You do it 6 times. So you don't put a plus here, but if you do it 1 time a day for 6 days, on the 6th day you have walked around it how many times? 6 times. Mm-hmm. So he says, then on the 7th day, and 7 priests shall bear the ark bear the 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets, and it shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, and all the people shall shout with a great shout, then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. So you have the people, they've marched around it for 6 days, and on this time they're to march around it, and they're not to they're not to say a word, they're not to have any conversation or whatever. And on the 7th time when they go around, they're going to blow those horns, ram's horns, and the people are going to give a great shout, and God brings the walls of the city down flat. So we come down to verse 9, and the armed men went before the priest and blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, but the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Now Joshua had commanded the people, saying, You shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed from your mouth until the day I tell you, or the day I say. And that would be in their marching around. And when I say shout, then you shall shout. So he had the ark of the Lord circle the city, going around it. Pardon me. Going around it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua arose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets, ramps, horns, and so forth. And they blew, and they this was the second day. Well, the second day they did the same thing. The third day they did the same thing. But in verse 15, in fact, they did this for 6 days. In verse 15, it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. On that day only, they marched around the city 7 times. So now you've got 6 and 7. So how many times did they march around the city? 13 in all for the week. And then we're told that when they did this, they shouted, and now the city shall be doomed by the Lord. This is verse 17. The city shall be doomed by the Lord to destruction, it and all who are in it. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, and she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers. Now look at verse 18. We're skipping over, we're reading more, but we're going to come back to some of this. And by all means, he said, and you, verse 18, by all means, abstain from the accursed things, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursed things, and make the camp of Israel a curse and a trouble. But all the silver and the gold and the vessels of bronze and iron are consecrated to the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the priest blew the trumpets, and it happened that when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. Now we're going to stop here just for a minute and make some comments, because there's some lessons here to be learned. That first of all, God said, I have given you the land, or given you the city. When they marched around this city 6 times for 6 days, or 6 times in 6 days, and they march around it 7 times on the 7th, have they earned the city? Have they, by that, is this, can they say to God that you owe me now the city? No. Of course not. And to look at it another way, some people say, well, I don't see any sense in doing certain things. I preached full-time for 54 years, finally retired because of health reasons. But I have heard that many times from people of other religions, when you talk about certain things, that it doesn't make any difference, or that's not important, and you don't have to do that. And each time that I hear that, I ask them, who said it doesn't make any difference? Who said that it's not important? Who said that it won't do any good? Did God tell you to do it? Did God say to us in the New? How can then someone say, well, that's not really important? That that we don't believe that's necessary. I have a letter in my file in my home where I wrote a lady. She had written me, and she had talked about all you have to do to be saved is to say the sinner's prayer. And I wrote back and showed her by the scriptures that this was not a scriptural position to take. that the Bible says, first of all, the Bible says nothing about saying a sinner's prayer. And secondly, that the Bible clearly says, Jesus said it, his apostles said it, repent and be baptized, every one of you. And she wrote back a very nice letter. She wasn't, being smart mouth or whatever you call it. She said she appreciated my letter, but where I go to church, we don't believe that baptism is essential. And I wrote back and asked her, of course, she said a lot of other things, but I wrote back and asked her, I said, who said it? Who made you believe that it's not essential? Who said it's not essential? Did God use it as a command? Is it in a command mode, so to speak? She never answered. And, but when you deal with people, you have to listen very carefully to what they say, because sometimes they will make you think that they believe a lot of things that they don't believe. Well, you come to this. First of all, no general of the Army or no admiral of the Navy or whatever high-ranking general or officer there be, no officer would ever use this particular method to take a city. Now, there were, at the time, before the city walls fell, no deaths had taken place, no battles had been fought, but God says, Joshua, you march around this 13-acre, and the 13 acres not in there, but I'm putting that in because they've measured that city, the old ruin, and that's what it is. But there's nothing that God said that I'm giving you this 13 acres, but you don't have to do a thing. I've given it to you. The fact that God said I've given it to you means God gave it to them. It was theirs. God says also later on, I've given you this land, the whole land. But they had to earn it. They had to work for it. They didn't earn it in the sense that they put God in debt to them. But when God tells us to do something, when we do that, we are not indebting God to us. We're simply obeying his will, showing our respect for him and for his will. When Noah built the ark, he didn't say, well, I've got it built. Now I'm through with you, God. I'm going to get in it and whatever. No, Noah did all that God commanded him because he respected God. And the same thing with us today. So they marched around the city, and just like it was the angel had said, or just like God had said, that when they completely did all that God commanded them, the walls fell. And then Joshua, at this point, takes a little break before the other soldiers go up and start slaughtering. In verse 22, but Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the country, go into the harlot's house, and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her. And the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers, and all that she had. Why were they saved?
Well, because she did what they had told her to do.
She did exactly what they told her to do. That's exactly right. And again, I think I may have given you here in the class a letter or an outline of a sermon by on Rahab's red rope or something like that. It may not, but I think I did. But anyway, they told Rahab what to do.
Rahab Scarlet Line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Rahab Scarlet Line. The spies spoke in authority from God. They were able to do that. They were under the leadership of Joshua, and Joshua told them to do this. And Joshua was in harmony with God, and so they go and she does them a favor. She shows them that she is willing to do whatever is necessary, because she's already said that our hearts are melted because of what we've heard that the Lord did 40 years ago down at the Red Sea. And so she says, I know the Lord has given you this. Now, when you come into the city, spare me. Now, I may have made a point on this last week, I'm not sure in the first lesson, but of all the people, this is something that it's not something that's, earth shaking or anything, but of all, when the armies go into the land and they take the southern land first, the northern land later, and so on, that Joshua splits the land in two. And as they go through, there is not a single resident of all that land that ever begged for mercy or begged to be not killed, except one, and that was Rahab. Now, we'll talk about these later on. The people of Gibeon, they deceived Joshua and made a treaty with them. Well, he made a treaty with them that he would not kill them, but theirs was a deceitful thing. But the only one that asked to be saved was Rahab, and God, through Joshua, granted the request. That's interesting. And again, the idea that God says, I'll be with you and I'll help you and I'll give you the land. There are lessons to be learned there. I have another lesson or another sermon that I heard Brother Winfred Clark at the time of Bremen, Georgia. He's deceased now. He had a lesson on lessons Israel learned at Jericho. And I may bring you a copy of that, and those of you who are online, if you like a copy, you can let me know. But anyway, there are lessons here that we can learn, that even though we're not in the New Testament, we're seeing the principles of God being carried out. God's law changes, or it did change. Patriarchal law, Mosaical law, law of Christ. But the principles in each one of those laws are always the same. It was just as wrong for Cain to kill Abel as it was for the people to kill Jesus, for that matter. They murdered him. It was wrong to murder before God said to Moses, in the law of Moses, thou shalt do no murder, or thou shalt not kill. The principles of God don't change. Just the particular law of the people, like in the Old Testament, under the patriarchal law, God spoke to the individual head of the family. He said to one, don't eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. To another, he said, build an ark. To another, he said, get out of your country. And to that same person, he said, offer your son to me as a burnt offering. And of course, he didn't let that go through. And then when we come to the Sinai, then we have a codified law, and that law did last for about 1,500 years, and this law was for the Israelite only. By the way, don't ever let somebody try to tell you, especially if they're talking about that we're under the Sabbath law today and so forth, that this law was to the Gentiles. This law that we call the law of Moses was never given to the Gentile, and no Gentile ever observed it unless he proselyted himself to the Jewish religion and became a proselyte. But then he ceased to be a Gentile in a spiritual way. But the law of Moses was for the purpose, and Paul says that it was for the purpose of the tutor to bring men to Christ. But now that Christ has come and we know how to get to him and know his commands, then we don't have that anymore. That law is taken out of the way and nailed to the cross. All right. Any comment you want to make in class? Okay. Then, okay.
Going back to, it seems like just before the city fell, in order for them to truly possess it, there couldn't be any sin.
Well, there was a sin that was committed, but the consequences of that sin took place after they had fulfilled all that God said, except this one person. And but even then, God said that Israel has sinned, even though one man sinned. And we're going to come to that. But these people, remember, they're God's chosen people. They are the people they're the seed of Abraham, out of Isaac, out of Jacob, and so on. And that they are the people that came up out of the land of Egypt, that Joseph went down and brought the people down. So they are not perfect people, but they, up to this point, those who are coming into the land, they are people who have obeyed God as to the best of their ability when He commanded them. And when they did not obey, then we're told that they do not receive the promise of God.
Oh, yeah, I see. I took it the wrong way. Here it's talking about the city is cursed. It's not talking about Israel.
Right. Okay. And then we find that when Rahab, or the young men brought Rahab out with all that she had, then they burned the city and all that was in it with fire. Only the silver, gold and vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the Lord. And Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's household, and all that she had. So she dwells in Israel to this day. And again, that would be to the day that this was written, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua had sent to spy out Jericho. So we have the city walls falling flat, possibly with exception of one short space. You know, where was Rahab's house located? It tells us that it was located on the wall. You know, she let them down, let the spies down with this scarlet line or red rope. She let the spies down with that, and it was on the wall. And they were, when she let them down, it was off the wall. Well, then I suppose just conclusion drawing would be that when the wall fell and they were saved, they at that time. That would seem to me to be the logical thing. But the point that really impresses me in this and in other places, in Joshua and in Kings and so forth, is that God said, don't spare anybody. You go in and you kill, you utterly destroy everything. If I don't know if you ought to be in 2 Samuel or 1 Samuel, when whoever teaches that gets, you're going to be in here for the first 7 chapters, but in chapter 15, God tells, or Samuel, or God through Samuel tells Saul to go down and utterly destroy the Amalekites. Now, there is none of us who have studied English very long that don't know the meaning or the definition of utterly. Utterly means completely. You don't, and in case Saul didn't understand, God said through Samuel, you utterly destroyed. He said that the women, the children, the sucklings, or those that are still nursing, the babies, the animals, and he named the animals, you destroy everything. And what happened? Well, they kept the king Agag alive, and they kept some of the best of the sacrifice, or best of the animals, not for themselves, but they were going to sacrifice them to the Lord. And when Samuel came to Saul and rebuked him, he said, "But I have kept the law of the Lord. I've obeyed the Lord." And Samuel has one of those sayings that he has sometimes. He said, in essence, sheep bleating, or whatever, however they said to do, or the cattle lowing. Dead sheep don't bleat, and dead cattle don't low. And you brought them back. Oh, he said, well, we did this because we wanted to present them as a sacrifice to the Lord. And it's here that, and I know I'm out of our area here, but it brings in again the need to do what God says. Samuel said to obey is better than to sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of the rams. And this is a lesson that we learn, not only here in Joshua, but we're going to learn this in Judges, we're going to learn it in Ruth, and we're going to learn it in the first 7 chapters of 1 Samuel, because it's God's law, it is God's way of doing things that He commands, and we obey. We don't tell God how to do something. We're going to come here in a little bit to this thing about putting those stones up, and or I may have skipped over, but anyway, we're going to come and talk about that, and then we'll make a point on that when we get there. But then we're down to verse 25, and verse 26, that Joshua charged him, saying, "Cursed be the man before the Lord who rises up and builds this city, Jericho. He shall lay its foundation with his firstborn, and with his youngest he shall set up the gates." In other words, by the death, if somebody tries to rebuild Jericho, he'll suffer the death of his son in the laying of the foundation, his firstborn, in laying the foundation, and he'll suffer the death of his youngest when the city is finished. And it's interesting to me that we find later on that there was a man who tried to do that, and actually he lost his son, his firstborn, at the beginning of it, and he lost the other one. And then this probably some 400 years later this man was trying to do this. And it's interesting also that old city that was there, it's just a mound of dirt. There are some areas that you can see where there were grain bins or whatever there, but that old part just never has been rebuilt. Jericho, the city of Jericho, modern city today, it's a rather thriving village or city, but that old city that was there, that just never has been rebuilt. And I believe it's because God said it wouldn't be.
When people, question God, and they'll say, like we're talking about how God said, utterly destroy this person, how God said, if you build the city, your children's going to die, your son going to die at a point in time, and people will question, how could a loving God do that? So how would you answer that?
Well, a loving God gave his son for the sin of man. God loved man. He so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And Satan is the author of sin. He's the father of the lie. God didn't cause people to sin. God never caused people to sin. Mm-hmm. And thus he is not guilty of picking and choosing and who would die. When we lost our first child, a little girl with leukemia, We had some people tell us or ask us, how can you serve a God that killed your daughter? God doesn't go around killing little. We're all going to die, and that sometimes we must suffer. But God is if God was that kind of person or that kind of being, would he, here's a question I would ask him, would he make provision for all mankind to be in heaven with him? And he did make that provision through his son. And even though it's not that's not my particular area, I've often said that that little word "so" in John 3:16 has more depth to it than any of us, any human being can understand. How much did God so love the world? Do you have a child? Would you give that child for me?
No.
Do you love me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're talking about, God, if you gave your child for me, you'd give him for a sinner. You'd give one who has sinned, if he's old enough for a sinner. But God gave a sinless son, one that didn't deserve to die. He had no sin in him, and he committed no sin. He gave that perfect one for us. And that is love. As the song said, if that isn't love, then there's no stars in the skies and so on. But people say, how could God do this? Well, God doesn't do that. Sin brought wickedness into the world, and it brought terror into the world, and God is not over there beheading people today, and so on. God wasn't behind the Paris thing, and he wasn't behind 9/11 and all this. God is not answerable to man, and man certainly has not the right to accuse God of doing that which is evil. You look at this when Joshua told them to go in and utterly, totally destroy even the little babies. Who were the ones that were saved in Amalek, and who were the ones that were saved that will be in heaven in Jericho? The babies, the innocents, and the flood, same way. God punishes people who sin, but little children don't sin. When I had two ladies of a particular religious group asked me about our daughter, and said that she went like that and said, such a shame. Saw her picture on the wall and said, such a shame that a beautiful little thing like that has to go to hell. And I ordered her out of the house. But the point was that to me, the woman they don't even believe in hell, and yet she, in order to try to convince me of how I needed to listen to her and take on her religion, she wanted to get against that to put my little daughter in hell. And of course, I don't believe she's there. But anyway, that is, I suppose, enough on that. We've got about 20 minutes. Let's go to AI. In AI, let's see if we can draw us a map here. I am not a good artist. I think I told you that last week. Here is Caesarea Philippi right up here. Here there's a stream comes out and one comes in, makes the Jordan River, comes down, comes into the Sea of Galilee, and then you come down. Comes back up, and you can tell if you look at a map, that don't look very much like your map. But you have right here, you have Jericho. You probably be able to get it there, but you have Jericho here. And right up here, just a short way, is Ai. And right over here, another short way, is Bethel. And then, of course, Jerusalem is, well, I believe it's about 7 miles from Bethel. After when you get into the King, that's about 7 miles. But here, there's this little town of Ai. It's the only city I know of that when you pronounce it, you spell it. But the children of Israel committed trespass regarding the accursed thing, for Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took of the accursed thing, so that the anger of the Lord burned against the children of Israel. Now, why would God be angry with the children of Israel because one man sinned?
That's what I was wondering. I mean, God gave the warning over here in chapter 6 and verse 18.
He did. He gave the warning.
But the one person represents the whole nation. The whole nation represents the world.
All right. I believe in this. What we have is because Achan sinned, like when one person sins in the church, and that sin is just, if these people don't do, when God finally tells them to sift out the man, find out who he is, and then of course, God already knew. But if these people, when they had found out that Achan was the one, if they'd have patted him on the back and said, well, that's all right, Achan, you didn't do it. It's not that bad at all. Then I think God would have turned against the whole nation. Because, but pardon me, but by doing what they did in finding him and punishing him, putting him to death and all of his family and all of his animals and so forth, they removed that. They were telling God that we are against that like you are. And then God did not blame them for that. But before they found this out, this one man's sin had terrible consequences. We'll look at that. Now, Joshua, this is verse 2, Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is beside Beth Aven, or Aven, and on the east side of Bethel, and spoke to them, saying, go up and spy out the country. So the men went up and spied out Ai, and they returned to Joshua and said to him, do not let all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and attack Ai. Do not weary all of the people there, for the people of Ai are few. So about 3,000 men went up and from the people, and they fled before the men of Ai. In other words, as we used to say in West Tennessee, the men of Ai put a whooping on them. They defeated those people. In fact, the Israelites left 36 men up on the battlefield dead. And we see that consequence, first of all, that here's a man that sinned, but his sin wasn't by just to himself. His sin caused the death of 36 people. And in verse 5, it says, and the men of Ai struck down about 36 men, for they chased them before the gate as far as Shebarim, and struck them down on the descent. Therefore the hearts of the people melted and became like water. Well, the first real battle where the soldiers take part in it other than just going in and killing the citizens of Jericho. The first battle where they march in and to attack and so on, they get themselves beaten and they lose 36 men. Now, the question that comes to me, and I don't know, maybe I think differently than other people, but I don't think I do. I think I've heard this before. But what problem do you see in those people going up to AI, taking about 3,000 and going up? What problem do you see in that? As Miss Alice C. Carr used to say to me when I was in the first grade, she called me Ernest. She said, "Put your thinking cap on."
Well, they're going up to correct something else when they're not making a correction inside their own camp.
Well, they don't know. They don't know that they don't know this thing within the camp just yet.
They didn't seek the Lord.
But they didn't what?
Seek the Lord.
They did not seek the counsel of the Lord. Now, on every other battle that we have in there, in one way or the other, Joshua seeks or God gives him the way to do it. In fact, when they go back to AI, God gives them the battle plan. He tells them to go and gives them the battle plan. But here is a person doing something that they didn't seek God. Do we know people today that do this, even in religion, those that do things that they don't seek out what the Bible says, they seek out what they want to do. And the Bible is very clear on the fact that God does not honor those people in their worship or in their actions simply because they did not obey the voice of the Lord. We talked about Saul a while ago. The kingdom was taken to him, and it says specifically, you did not obey the voice of the Lord. If you don't obey, now that's not Phariseeism. It's not earning your salvation. When we obey, we're saved. We're still saved by God's love and grace, but we have to do things to appropriate that. And I don't understand, never have understood, why people take a command of God and say that if you do that, you're trying to earn or work out, you're trying to work for your salvation. If that's the case, then even to have faith, John 6:29, Jesus said, this is the work of God that you believe on him whom he hath sent. Not God doing the believing, but it's the work of God that God says you are to do, to believe on the Son. That makes faith a work, but not a work of merit, but a work of this is what you must do in order to be pleasing to God. So we find the people come back, the army comes back, they're ragged, I suppose, left 36 men up. Then Joshua, verse 6, then Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of the Lord until evening, and he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. And Joshua said, alas, Lord God, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us? Oh, that we had been content to dwell on the other side of the Jordan. Who are they blaming? Who is Joshua blaming here?
Blaming God.
He's blaming God. And it's the blame game. It's God's fault. You know, who was it that used to, in a television program, it's a comic that the devil made me do it?
Flip Wilson.
Flip Wilson, yeah. Devil made me. And then he'd always get a laugh, and I'd always laugh at it, because, you know, he wasn't giving a doctrine there, but it's just one of those sayings but it's that blame game.
When you see also here, he's doing the same thing that the people did that was following Moses. They were wishing they were back in Egypt.
Yeah.
He's wishing he was back on the other side of Jordan.
Yeah. Why did you set out of Egypt? Why did you bring us out here? We remember the cucumbers and the garlic, and our stomachs are telling us, not our minds, what we ought to do. And here, Joshua, this is the only time that I have found in the Bible. I'm not saying this is something that Joshua did that is wrong, but there's not a bad word said about Joshua other than this, if this is bad. Actually, Joshua he was perplexed. He did not know, and he said, what have we done? We've done what you said. But God said, get up there. And the Lord tells him, get up, and verse 10, get up. Why do you lie thus on your face? Joshua, get up. There's sin in the camp, and you've got to find it, and you've got to do something about it. Now, if Joshua had not done that, then Joshua would have been a false leader. But Joshua did that. But anyway, he said, O Lord, verse 8, what shall I say when Israel turns its back before its enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear it and surround us and cut off our name from the earth. Then what will you do with your great name? Now, Moses, on occasion, when God was angry with the people, God would plead with the people, and he would say, what will the world think if you do this? And how is this going to affect your name? Joshua is not preaching, neither did Moses preach to God and correct God in anything, because God never needed to correct him. But he's saying, if what I have just seen, if we're going to be beaten by these kind of nations or these kind of cities, what are people going to say about us as your children and about you as our God? And it's a good question, but God didn't take it at all. He said to Joshua, get up, and why do you lie thus on your face? Israel has sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant, which I commanded them. For they have even taken some of the accursed things, and have both stolen and deceived, that they have also put it among their own stuff. Now notice, they have taken some of the accursed things. That's a sin in itself, because it was disobedience to God. They were not to do that. They have stolen, they have deceived, and they have hidden. They're trying to cover their sin. And when you look at the penalty that came upon Achan, that he was to be stoned, and then all of his house and all of his things, and then they were to be burned, and then more stones piled up on that. You think, well, what is so bad about taking a garment that's beautiful? I've seen beautiful garments. I've seen men with beautiful suits and women with beautiful clothes, and you can say, well, I wish I had something like that. And if you see a chance to get it, well, of course, we're not thieves, but there are people who are. But they don't. Well, I just got a little bit. I didn't take everything. I took a garment, and I took some silver and a wedge of gold. But that's all I did. What's so bad about that? And one might even expect to hear him say that I bet I'm not the only one, but he was the only one. So, but this was his argument, and we'll see that. So they in the morning, therefore, you shall be brought according to your tribes. God said, this is God saying to Joshua about finding out who's guilty. He says there's an accursed thing. So he says, in the morning, therefore, you shall be brought according to your tribes, and it shall be that tribe which the Lord takes shall come according to the families, and the families which the Lord takes shall come by households, and the households which the Lord takes shall come man by man. Then it shall be that who is taken with the accursed thing shall be burned with fire, he and all that he has, and because he has transgressed the covenant of the Lord, and because he has done this disgraceful thing. So God now, since Joshua did not seek counsel, and should we go up against Ai, if he had sought counsel, God would have told him then, there's sin in the camp. That you need to get that sin out. But Joshua didn't ask that, but he learned a lesson here. And now God tells him that you are to take this taking people by their tribes and by their households and so on, and by their families, and whoever the Lord points out who the guilty one, that's the one you are to punish. And so Joshua, verse 16, rose early in the morning and brought Israel by the tribes, and the tribe of Judah was taken. And he brought the clan of Judah, and he took the family of the Zarhites, and brought the family of the Zarhites man by man, and Zabdi was taken, and he brought his household man by man, and Achan the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah was taken. Now, here stands Achan. His sin is known. Does he plead? I don't know. Bible doesn't tell us. I don't think it would have done any good if he had pleaded. That's my personal opinion. But nonetheless, this man had done that, deliberately sinned. He had not shown any repentance. He could have at some time before that time. He could have come to Joshua and say, "I have sinned. I've done what you told me not to do. I want to give that back, and I want to repent of that." What God would have done then, I don't know. But at this point, he is standing before Joshua, and Joshua says to Achan, "My son, I beg you, give glory to God of Israel and make confession to him, and tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me." And Achan couldn't hide it from him because God knew what he had done. And Achan answered Joshua and said, "Indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God, and this is what I have done. When I saw among the spoils a beautiful Babylonian garment, 200 shekels of silver and a wedge of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them, and there they are hidden in the earth in the midst of my tent, with all the silver under it." Now, Moses, were given by God to Moses. Which one did Achan, mainly, which one did he break? That would be when he did this. But why did he steal it? The word is there. He coveted it. He coveted. Covet, when a person covets something, then he is very likely to take that something. If my understanding of the word covet is true, the definition that I can understand, it's the desiring of something, either someone else or whatever, something that you have no right to have, but yet you desire to the point that you will take it. And I believe that we talk about the word covet is not a bad word, although it's not used in the scriptures in any good way, but we use it sometimes, that I covet your prayers. And I don't find a fault with that. I don't say it, but I hear people that say their prayers and so on. But this is what he did. And then the Bible tells us that that Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent. This is verse 22. I'm going to just read down through the rest of the chapter, and then we'll stop. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, the silver, the gold, the wedge, his sons and his daughters, his oxen, his donkeys, his sheep, his tent, and all that he had, and they brought them to the valley of Achor, I believe it's pronounced. And Joshua said, why have you troubled us? The Lord will trouble you this day. So all Israel stoned him with stones, and they burned them with fire after they had stoned them with stones. Then they raised over him a great heap of stones, still there to this day. So the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger. Therefore the name of that place has been called the Valley of Achor till this day. Now, one last point I want to make on this, and then we will close. I don't know how many sons and I don't know how many daughters he may have had, but I know because this man sinned that there were 36 men lying up there on the battlefield dead. Now he loses his own life. He loses his wife's life. He loses his daughter's life. If he had more than one, he loses his son's life. And then the brute animal has to suffer death or suffer pain because of this man's sin. We ought never, pardon me, we must never look at sin as it won't hurt anything. It won't hurt anything to take a drink. It won't hurt anything to flirt a little bit, or it won't hurt anything to steal an apple or an orange, something like that. But again, who said it won't hurt? What does God say? And I think we need to teach this, and we need to practice this. Thank you for being here, and I hope those of you who are online, if you're still there, we'll give you some emails tomorrow or something to give you some explanation of what went on. Thank you for being here.
It's interesting, how sin